2023 Hall of Fame inductee, Glenn Fontenot. A Louisiana native, Glenn Fontenot was born and raised in Ville Platte and has been around horses most all of his life. As an adult, he was a farmer of soybeans, rice, and cattle, but his true passion was owning and breeding racing quarter horses. Like many South Louisiana horsemen in the 1960s, Fontenot's interest in racing quarter horses in Louisiana was peaked through the hotbed of bush tracks in the area.
I bought my place in Ville Platte, Louisiana in 1960. And the boys, I had 4 little boys that they liked animals, and I did. I was born on a farm and raised on a farm, but we had working horses. We didn't have no race horses.
And there, we lived among a hotbed of match tracks and match racing, and of course we were rice farmers and cattle producers, so we had a lot of saddle horses. And a good friend of my dad's, a neighbor of ours, lived down the road, and one day they got a wild idea that they were going to take 2 of their saddle horses and see which one was faster. So we met on the dirt road between our farms, and I bet we raced those 2 horses down that dirt road that day probably 5 or 6 times to make sure which one was the fastest. And sure enough, that Sunday we all showed up at the match track in Grand Prairie. It was called Happy Hills, and put those 2 saddle horses in the gates and popped them. Neither one had ever been out of a starting gate, and sure enough, the wrong horse won. So that was my first recollection of racing. Of course, with them saddle horses is what I think sparked my dad to maybe try to go find a little bit, better bred, better quality quarter horses. And from that day forward, he's always had it in his mind that he wanted to improve and have the best that he could certainly get his hands on,
Match tracks, it was just what we did. So we got up on Sunday and we went to the track. We might have run Mamou Downs or Plaisance, but we went to the match races and we ran a horse. My brother Barry was the jockey. I was the younger brother. So in all cases, it didn't really matter what was going on that day of the race. I had to sit on the bucket at the stall to make sure nobody tampered with the horse. That was my job, and it was awesome.
We didn't have our yearling sale like we have today, but they had the Quarter Horse Association. They put on a sale in Alexandria, and we went to that sale. And I had one of the boys old enough to start showing, so I bought a good-looking filly, and she was raised bred. It looked like she could run. She'd outrun everything we had, but didn't know if she was good enough to go to the track. So we tried her and clocked her and decided she was. And we went at Evangeline Downs on Easter Sunday afternoon. It was the first race, and she won her first race. And I think Tommy showed her that in 4-H she was good enough for a project for the 4-H boys.
I was probably about 12 years old when we went to a sale in Alexandria, Louisiana, and bought a mare named Kitty Dugan, and she became my 4-H project. I showed her in 4-H, and we broke her. That's kind of where it all started. After that, we grew up, we always had horses. There was no question you were going to be around a horse or a cow. So you grew up and we'd go to these little local horse shows in the Ville Platte or Evangeline Parish areas, and that was part of life.
And that's how we got started. Then another one come up. I thought it was better, and I bought a mare named Flashy Hemp, a filly that qualified for the Derby as a 3-year-old, And I went and I bought a full sister to her full sister, and we ran her, and we won 20 races on the bush track with her. And I ran her one time at Delta, and she was on the board, but I decided she wasn't good enough to win, so we played with her on the bush track.
We ended up winning 12 or 13 races in a row on the bush track with her. We were almost to the point where she was open to the world. This filly could outran some good horses. Anyway, ended up breeding her, bred her to Hemp Meyers, and got a filly by the name of Flashy Hemp. And Flashy Hemp's what really put my dad on the map.
With his success growing not only on the recognized tracks of South Louisiana, but also on the bush tracks in the area, Glenn Fontenot moved deep into the breeding world as he decided to stand some studs on his farm in the Ville Platte area.
Well, the first one I had was a thoroughbred stallion, and he was a looker, and he was a speedball. And a lot of people were succeeding in breeding mares to a good, quick thoroughbred like that. Ray's Law was his name. I had him and for a few years, but I just had a handful of mares, you know. He colicked and died, but he was at the age, you know, he was 18 or 19 years old when it happened. And I was at Delta Downs just a few days after Ray's Law died and met up with Mr. Darling. He says, "Hey, I heard you lost your horse." Died. I says, "Yes, sir, I did." He says, "I'll let you have Mighty McKay if you want him." I said, "I don't want Mighty McKay. I want Hemp Meyers." He said, "Well, let me think about it." And that was it. And later on that night at the races, we talked again a little bit. I said, "Are you serious about maybe letting me have Hemp Meyers?" He said, "Yes." Well, I says, "I'll be at your office Monday morning."
He got Hemp Meyers to stand from Mr. Darling, and I was probably a freshman in high school. It was a very exciting time for me because we finally had evolved. Like, this is the nicest horse he had ever had.
We were both happy because his first crop is when we hit Flashy Hemp. I think we had 4 stakes winners. So I sold Flashy Hemp in our breeders' sale for $3,500, I believe, and she made around $300,000. And from then on, every now and then I'd acquire another one. At one time, I had 16 brood mares when I was standing Hemp Meyers.
When he had Hemp Meyers rolling, he was on cloud 9, and I don't blame him. I mean, Hemp Meyers' first crop had 2 big stakes winners in it, Flashy Hemp and Son of a Hemp. I mean, everybody in the state of Louisiana and the surrounding states, even from Georgia, as far as Georgia, Texas, Mississippi, they all wanted some Hemp Meyers babies.
Biggest year I bred was bred 128 mares. That's right. And out of the 128, we pronounced 118 in foal. So I was very happy with my stallion and my breeding operation. And I still had the horse was still owned by Mr. Darling, and a lot of others went and visit with him because they had bigger facilities than I had, and they talk about it and bragged on what they had, and they wanted to stand him instead of standing in here. They said we'd get more mares, but we had all we could handle over here, and Mr. Darling would never let anybody else have it.
At one point in time, there was a lot of turmoil in the association, and my father was asked to drop everything that he was doing and run the association. And that meant rice farming, soybean farming, could have meant breeding mares, could have meant a cattle operation. He had to drop what he was doing at the drop of a hat and go to the office and make sure everything was handled.
The year I was president is the year we hired Laverne, and we did very well together. We worked great, and that's when our association grew into what it is today.
I now own about 7 mares, and one thing he told me when I got into the business, you know, you're better off with one good mare than buying 5 or 10 mediocre mares. And so I tried to go that route, because he said if he could do one thing over, he would have sold all his mares and bought 2 dash for cash mares and would have been better off.
Yeah, his passion is evident in his life and his accomplishments with the horses. His passion was raising a good racehorse, and in particular, he wanted to raise one that could compete in the Louisiana bred program. That was definitely his passion.
This means a lot to him. I'm just proud. I'm happy for him, and I think he's deserving.
It's a great honor. What it means to me is that he's finally being recognized for all the hard work he's done over the years to not only breed and raise, you know, good quarter horses, but it's what he's done for the Louisiana Quarter Horse Breeders Association. That association means more to him than most people will ever know.
He did a lot of work for the association that was done for the better of the breeders. And as a breeder myself, knowing that my father is in the Hall of Fame, it's unbelievable. It's a great thing, well deserved.
They liked it and learned about it, and they saw the good and the bad with it. They were right in the midst of it. And one of these days, they're going to have something better than Flashy Hemp, I hope.
The 2023 inductee, Glenn Fontenot.